have those days when you wake up and you just feel off? Like things just don't feel right. And as the day progresses, you get like more miserable and you get a little bitey and snarky and short-tempered maybe with your spouse or if your kids happen to be home or whatever. And you just can't quite put your finger on why you feel that way or why you feel just off. I have been actively pushing against that in trying to slow down and stop and think about why I'm feeling the way I do or why my outlook is like this today. Why am I feeling overwhelmed? Why am I feeling off? Why am I feeling irritated? Why am I feeling a little down? Those sorts of things. And I have come to the realization, hello, my friend, and welcome to Stillwell Podcast. I am so glad you're here. Listen, make sure you take a minute to head over to Stillwell Mom website so you can learn more about strong, steady, rooted foundations. And you can find more information about building physical capacity, emotional balance, and a deeper faith in midlife. And remember, your body is not a problem to fix, but a gift to honor, and you don't have to do midlife alone. Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of Stillwell Podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Dr. Brooke, and I'm so excited to have another conversation with you about all things midlife after the kids have grown, after they're moving out of the house. We're in this next phase of life, kind of thinking through what's going on, what's next for us, talking about aging. There's all of these things. If you watched the first episode, which dropped this week, then you got to hear about many of those things. I was all over the place a little, but I really wanted to just give you a highlight and breakdown of how I saw this podcast going, because again, I really want to have this time with you as if we were sitting down over a cup of tea talking to each other. So I really hope it comes across that way. And this episode in particular, do I wish you were sitting in my family room with me right now, or that we were in a cafe having a cup of tea? Because it is I don't know, I'm going to say tricky topic, and it might not be tricky for you. Maybe it's just tricky for me, but I'm guessing that at least some of you are going to be able to relate to this. And it's been weighing on my heart for, I would say, the last couple months. But if I'm being really honest and frank with you, it's been weighing on my heart for almost as long as I can remember. And I think this is one of, dare I say, my biggest struggles in life, just in general. And then certainly even more so in this phase of life as my kids are getting older. And just faced with different types of transitions. And that is, I'm building this up and it's like, dun, dun, dun. You might be listening and then be like, But loneliness. And this is a big thing for me. And I'm going to guess that some of you, at least some of you, feel this in this phase of life. I wonder that, you have those days when you wake up and you just feel off. Like things just don't feel right. And as the day progresses, you get like more miserable and you get a little like bitey and snarky and short-tempered maybe with your spouse or if your kids happen to be home or whatever. And you just can't quite put your finger on why you feel that way or why you feel just off. And then sometimes I think that can even happen over longer periods of time where we just feel like not so great. And a lot of times we just keep going through the motions and moving fast. So we don't even have to stop and think about why we feel that way. But I have been actively pushing against that in trying to slow down and stop and think about why I'm feeling the way I do or why my outlook is like this today. Why am I feeling overwhelmed? Why am I feeling off? Why am I feeling irritated? Why am I feeling a little down? Those sorts of things. And I have come to the realization that one of the things that drives many of my emotions is loneliness and afraid of being alone and feelings of disconnectedness. And I'm going to say that I probably, we started and I mentioned this, have struggled with this for a very long time. And for some reason, I had just had not so much in elementary school. Now we're going back years. But like high school, later in high school, and then certainly college, grad school and beyond, for some reason, I just struggled with female friendships and deep connections. And I think part of the issue for me has been that I like to go deep with people and I like to really connect. I don't do just, I have a hard time sometimes with just like small talk and tons and tons. I'm not the person that has tons and tons of friends around me. I like a small inner circle that I'm tight with, that I know that I can trust, that I can share things with, and we're on the same page. And maybe my expectations are too high. I think I talked about that the first podcast, that sometimes just our expectations we have to let go of. We have too high of expectations, and it's going to lead to us always feeling like let down. So maybe that's part of it. But I wonder if I know that in this phase of life, it becomes even more obvious that we feel that way. I think a lot of us are struggling even more, feeling lonely and having trouble finding friends because of the phase of life that we're in. I mean, let's get real about this. A lot of our friends, when our kids were growing up, most of our adult life came from our kids. So, like, I remember when I got done with college. Well, not college, graduate school. And my husband and I were engaged. I moved to the town where he was living in DC, and we then got married. And I remember thinking when we moved into that house, wow, it's a lot harder when you move to a new area and you're not in school to make friends. Because, unless you're meeting them at work or you're in a neighborhood, we were lucky to be in a neighborhood. So we had some people that were our age, but it just becomes more difficult. You're not in class. You're maybe not going out as much. And so that was a difficult thing that I had to navigate and get through. But it wasn't long after my husband and I were married that we had our first son. And so then what I found, and I'm sure you can relate, is once you start having kids, you build your friend network around your kids. And because all of your time is with your kids. We're taking them to the sporting events. We're taking them to the after school activities. We're doing, all the things that they're interested in, the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts or the dancing. I mean, there's a wide range of things, but we're just always busy with them and our lives are revolving around them. They enjoy their friends. So to befriend their friends' parents is an easy thing and a great thing for everyone. And I had great friends. I'm so blessed to say that I had a really good connection. My son, my oldest one especially, is a social butterfly. He had tons of friends around him from the start, and they were all great kids, and the parents were great people. But as the kids grow up and they move on, they leave home, maybe they're going to college or whatever they're doing, at least for me, I find that there weren't the sporting events anymore. There weren't the activities. There weren't the things that were keeping us together. And so then the friendships start to fall apart. And sometimes also the people that we were friends with from our kids are maybe, I mean, not to say that they're not fabulous people and good people and we didn't have fun, but they're maybe not people, like the common denominator was your kids. And then when the kids are gone, you're like, well, it's a little trickier to maintain that friendship. The other thing for my husband and I, we just moved 2 years ago. And so that was tricky too, again, because we're in a new town. We're in a neighborhood where it's not as easy to make friends. We're older, our kids are older. And so navigating that is really tricky. So it's easy, I think, in this phase of life to feel very lonely and a little disconnected. And that's a really tough thing. And, there's two things that I want to unpack here, because I just think that feeling lonely and feeling disconnected is one of the easiest ways for us to get distracted in our lives and to just feel really down and to get even to a point of sometimes feeling depressed. We're not meant to go through, human beings are meant to be in community. We're not meant to go through life alone. We're meant to share our lives. And so when you feel disconnected and you feel lonely, and now even your time that was spent with your kids as they were growing up, you had your kids at home, you were being distracted by them, when all of that settles and you don't find that you have a lot of friends around or connection, it's tough. And so I think, as we talk about being strong, steady, and rooted in midlife, and we'll continue to talk about this, having that Stillwell life and being a Stillwell mom, we need to address the topic of friendships and connections and how do we go about not feeling so lonely. I know some of you are listening. I want to make sure that I address this for everyone, and some of you might just turn this episode off now, because I've actually talked to some women who have told me we had a great group of friends. Actually, I think, who was I talking to? I think it was a parent that I met on my older son's lacrosse team. And she was saying, man, she was an empty nest. This was her last son was on my son's lacrosse team. So it was her last child was out of the house, empty nest. And she's like, it's been tough, but We had such a great group of friends of lacrosse parents from him in my son in high school, and we've all stayed friends. We're traveling together, we're doing things together, we get together, and it's just been amazing. And I'm not gonna lie, I know you're not supposed to feel jealous, and it's not Christian. I was jealous. I mean, I was happy for her, but also like, oh man. So I think some of you are in whoever, if you're listening to this and you're in that situation, you're probably not listening anymore. But also, I just want to say, congratulations. That's amazing. Like, I would hope that we would all have those types of friends around us. And let's be honest too, we're all wired a little differently. Some of us want and need to work more extroverted and we need a big group of people around us. And some of us don't. Some of us are, on the other end where we're introverted and prefer to be alone. But I would say and push you a little bit if you are that person, because I'm a little bit like that, and just say that we still need to have at least a little bit of connection. We still need to have somebody that we can talk with and talk about struggles that we're going through or sharing how we're feeling about, I don't know, if something comes up with our health or, something that's come up with our kids or in our marriage. We need those connections. So I think I think we need to be mindful of that. But I want to approach this from two, and I'm trying to think of the best way for us to get into this. I want to talk about why we need the connection, why it's important, but I also want to talk about why sometimes connections or disconnection, loss of friendship is also important. And that's probably just going to be an interesting thing to talk through. So I think I've probably have already talked about why connection is important. But if you don't know connection, we are meant, again, I've stated this earlier, we are meant to be connected. We're meant to live in community. If you are in the Bible is explicit about being in community. Through the New Testament, they talk about the early church meeting together and breaking bread together and having dinner together. Jesus always had a group of people around him. In the Old Testament, a lot of the Jewish traditions and holidays were around the group of them coming together and celebrating and feasting together. So we're meant to be connected. It's one of the best things for us. We need that connection. We need it to flourish in this phase of life. There's even research that came out of, I think it was Harvard, a year or two ago, that's of all the things that show, and you all have probably heard this is probably old news, but in case some of you haven't, I'll just repeat it. Of all of the factors or benchmarks in this research where they followed people for years that was connected to their longevity and health, the biggest one was not like what they were eating or how they were moving their body or any of those things. The biggest benchmark was, or needle mover was, their connection or their sense of connection or their sense of belonging. So this is not just important. We talk about these three pieces of thriving in midlife, and the physical piece is important for our health, but the emotional piece is so important for our health and for our just flourishing. And we are far more emotionally balanced and healthy when we have good connection. And then on top of that, the faith piece. And this is another area where we need to have time alone with God. For sure, without a doubt, I have found that in my life, and certainly, especially in the last 6 months. So we need to have our own relationship with God, but we also need to build community. We also need to have people around us when we're down or we have a need that we can call and say, hey, I could really use prayer for this. Or, even need to, if we're believing a lie or we're feeling overwhelmed, sometimes we need to talk to somebody else that'll tell us, like, that's not you, or that's not a liar. That's not what's happening. Here's how I perceive this for you. And maybe it's even, you need sometimes to hear the hard truth. You need somebody to tell you if, you need good advice. You need constructive criticism. We have the tendency to not always see that. Our judgment can be clouded when we look at our own life. We're not always as self-aware as we should be. So we need to have those friends. We need to have those connections that can lift us up and speak truth over us and pray for us and pray with us. So there's that piece too. And actually, as I have been thinking about I have been pulling this apart for the last couple of weeks. And then three things happened. I was in a church. I was at church, and our pastor, Pastor Tim, was talking about being in a desert season. And I'll get to that in a second. And then I've been reading, I told you in, I think the last podcast episode that I've been reading Jenny Allen, and she was talking about get out in her book, Get Out of Your Head, how you need to have connection and how important it is. And then another thing that happened was my dad texted me just yesterday morning. So let me start with Jenny. Let me then jump to Pastor Tim, and then I'll end with my dad. But Jenny was saying how important it is to have good friends. And I had kind of been in this place where I'm just going to be real here. Like I've been feeling a little more lonely. I feel disconnected. I don't feel like I have some very good friends, but they don't live close by. So I don't see them regularly. We get on calls sometimes, but it just doesn't feel the same. And so I've been feeling a yearning in my heart. And I have talked about this. If you listen to me on Life After Kids, I've talked about this before, but a yearning in my heart to have stronger connections with women. And that's been actually a recent prayer of mine, that I would just be connected with wise, God-fearing women to help me do life, women that'll, bring out the best in me and not the worst, and help me to just fully become like God has intended for me. And so then reading Get Out of Your Head, Jenny talking about how important it is when we are spiraling in our thoughts or feeling overwhelmed to have those people that we can go to, even if for nothing else, to just speak what you're going through out loud. Sometimes we just need to speak it to process it, because the more we keep things inside, the more we spiral. And so reading that really, gutted is going to sound really dramatic. It didn't necessarily gut me, but when I read that, it just spurred me on to think about even more that I need to work on. I need to make that an important part of my life. I need to put some focus there, to put some focus on my relationships. And I've been feeling that. I was sitting with it over my 50th birthday as well, because while it was a wonderful celebration, it wasn't what I had been planning for several years with a friend. It was just different. And so I had been thinking through that already. So then let's rewind a little bit, because I just read that this week in one of her chapters. So let's rewind to the church service that was on Sunday with Pastor Tim, where he was talking about being in this desert season. And the overarching message was, just because something seems successful, that is not your sign that that's where God wants you to be. And sometimes God is going to take you into the desert, like away from all this success, to do something else for him. And there was also this message of sometimes he takes you away from relationships and people that you think are good for you or that seem to fill your cup, because you need to learn how to be dependent on him. You need to put him as your top priority. And you guys, I was so convicted by that, because and I'm going to be really vulnerable and real here too. I am definitely, I see for sure, and I don't know if my friends have seen this in the past. I should talk to them about this, but I have high expectations. I put a lot of high expectations on myself. I put a lot of high expectations on other people as well. And I definitely do that to my friends. And I know that I have put so much pressure, not outwardly, but just in my own mind of what I want from my relationships, that I rely on them to fill a gap in my heart, to bring joy to me, to make me feel happy and feel good in my life. This is just, I hope you guys don't think I'm crazy here. I wonder how you guys feel about this. But I rely a lot on other people for that. And I feel like I'm in this season where God is like, those people can't give you what you need. Those people are not, yes, they're good friends and they're fun to be around and you can lean on them, but they are not responsible for bringing you joy. They are not the people. They are not the thing that's going to make you feel happy about your life now that your kids are grown. They are not. You should not be relying on them to put you in a happy spot, because the problem is that they're human and they're going to fall short. They're not perfect. I'm not perfect. None of us are perfect. But if you're relying on a person, a friend, whoever that is, to bring you your joy, to make you happy, and then that friend falls short in some way, it could be something small, like you really needed them to text you or call you and they didn't, or they canceled on you. It could be something big. And I've walked through these seasons where I was really hurt by, just gutted by friends. And if that's it, if you're in that situation where you're relying on them for your joy, your whole world is upended because they are not the rock that you put your life on. And in fact, I would even go as far to say is that we can make our relationship idols above God. Anything can be an idol. Anything that takes our focus from God can be an idol. And I think we can do that in our relationships. I think we do that with our kids. I'm actually planning a whole other podcast episode just on talking about the different idols that we have, because I know I've had so many of them in my life. But that's what I'm getting the sense of. Like, you're not supposed to be relying on them. And I'm going to put you in a season of your life where you might feel a little lonely in order for you to find me and draw close to me and make me your best friend, because that's the way I intended it from the start. And God is the only one that is perfect. He is the only one that loves me perfectly. He's the only one that will not let me down. And He only one where I'm going to find true joy and peace in my life, about myself. That's the other thing. I mean, can you relate to, I'm sure you can relate because we've all done this as women, where we want to get our self-worth from other people and how they feel about us. Oh my gosh, that is the worst. Because if they treat you poorly, you don't feel like you're measuring up, then what? Where God is like, I made you and I love you just the way you are. You don't have to be anybody else. You need to obey me. You need to spend time with me. You need to seek me and, ask for forgiveness for the things that need to be forgiven, but you don't have to be somebody who you are not. And that is, it's so freeing, but also it just removes that, like, it's like I can breathe. I feel like I say this a lot, but it just lets me take a deeper breath. And it allows me to look back on friendships that I've had, some that I've lost, some that are being rebuilt, or new connections, whatever it is, and realize, like, I put way too much pressure on them. And until I get, again, it's God first. And until I get my relationship with Him right, the other relationships in my life are not going to be right. Until I get my self-worth and confidence in Him, I'm not going to be able to show up as myself to be the friend I need to be, or to attract the friends that I want. So I think it's just so important. And I think that might be even just hitting me now, just as I'm processing it with you. But really, how do we expect to have good friendships if we don't have a good relationship with God? Because that should be our most important friendship. That should be how we model all of our other friendships. And so within, you might go, well, how do I build a relationship with God? Well, how would you build a relationship with anyone else? One, you spend time with them. You get to know them, you talk to them, you share with them. And I've been doing a lot more of that recently. I haven't been so good about it in the past, but, maybe the times where you're feeling lonely or a little brokenhearted or wishing you had somebody to go get a coffee with, maybe you make, I don't drink coffee, but tea, coffee for you if it is, whatever one. Make that hot beverage and sit down with the Lord and just have a talk with Him, or just be quiet and listen for Him. Yeah, that's really tough. And, I said that I would circle also to what my dad texted me, and it really was the same thing Tim said, Pastor Tim, but it was just a little more direct. He was really sweet. He texted me he was so excited that the podcast had dropped, and I'm so proud of you. And actually, he texts me because, if we can be light in this topic for a minute, he said, I shared your podcast on Facebook with everyone, but I really want to share it with my siblings and some of my family members, and they're not on Facebook. How do I do it? Can you send me the link? Can you text it? They're having trouble. So it was this whole 30-minute thing, but it was so great. And they've been so supportive. But I mentioned to him somewhere in that text conversation about it being difficult to do things on your own. And he said the same thing that Pastor Tim did. Sometimes God removes hindrances in your life so that you can show up for the life that you need to, or to show that your strength doesn't come from anybody else. Your support system doesn't come from anybody else. He may use other people, but it has to start with Him. So, yeah. And that's the thing I guess we could talk about too. The next steps are, if you're feeling lonely, because this is the push and pull. I've got Pastor Tim's message resonating with me, that you might be in the desert right now. You might be in a quiet season. God might be peeling back those friendships in order for you to build a better relationship with Him. He may be pulling away things that are keeping you from Him. He may be pulling away things that just weren't good for you. Relationships that weren't good, that weren't bringing out the best. Like, we need to have friendships that bring out the best in us, that help us be better people, not tear us down, or not not be bad influences on us. So it might just be as simple as that. But there's this push and pull for me for hearing Pastor Tim's message. And then just as I'm getting comfortable with that, I'm reading Jenny Allen's book and I'm reading about how important connections are. So I'm like, oh, okay, I see what you're doing, Lord. Like, yes, you can be in a season where and I think we all go through different seasons, right? Sometimes we have, our social calendars are filled and busy and we've got people all around us. And sometimes it ebbs and flows. It's a little more quiet. So, we all go through those seasons. Last summer, I spent a whole summer like just about completely disconnected. I mean, other than my husband and my kids, I was really kind of quiet, just spending a lot of time with the Lord and in nature and my dogs. But I think, yeah, like we have to be careful that we don't stay in that cycle. We have to have both, but we do need connection. So if you're finding yourself in a cycle of feeling really lonely and really disconnected, yeah, maybe it's where you need to be right now, but also we can't stay there for the long term. That's my point. That's no place to stay for the long term. And again, it doesn't have to be tons of friends all around us, but we do need to have some friends that we can rely on. We do need to have community. So then the question is, thank you so much, Jenny, for that I need them. How do I do, like, okay, so it's important. What am I going to do about it? That's the question of the hour. Well, if friendship's so important, great, but how do we make those friendships? How do we find friends at this age? It's not easy, right? Again, like our kids are older. We might even be choosing different careers or heading into retirement. So we don't necessarily have the friends maybe from work. It's tricky. It's really tricky. And if you've moved somewhere new, that makes it even more trickier. So listen, I'm not going to sit here and pretend to tell you that I have all the answers because I really don't. I've obviously just told you that I've been struggling with this. But here's what I will say, because I've been thinking on it. And this is the first thing that's been on my heart is that, well, here's the very first thing. I've been praying about it. And I told you that already, right? That I have been praying, and this is a fervent prayer for mine, that I will continue to pray for the Lord to bring wise, God-fearing women into my life. That's number one. And I've talked about this. I actually did a reel on Instagram about this with physical health. Like there's this push and pull between, we need to pray to God for healing and for health and wellness, and He can heal and do all things. He is the healer. He did make us. But we also have to be good stewards and take action around that faith and take care of ourselves. And I think friendship here is the same way, where we can pray for, God-fearing, wise, kind, intelligent, whatever it is that you're longing for in our life. We pray for that, right? We take that to God. But then we don't just sit around and wait for them to show up at our doorstep, because that's likely not to happen. So we have to take steps too. So for me, the next step was, Brooke, you got to get plugged in, girl. You got to get plugged into church or maybe a women's Bible study. Like that is what's on my immediate mind, that, we're in summer right now, but once summer wraps up, I need to get plugged into church, either in a women's group, or I'm looking at, and this isn't with the church that I go to, because there's the church that I attend when I'm in Florida, I attend. And if I'm not there, it's typically virtual, which is tough because the majority of the time I'm not there. You probably don't care about this, but my point is, a lot of the time I'm doing virtual church, which is great because I love the pastor. I love the worship. I love all of it. It's bad because it's hard to build community. So I need to get plugged in on a regular basis. And I'm looking actually at a church that I just heard from. I'm in a mom in prayer group, which that would be another way to meet women, friends, if you're listening. I'll talk to them about that in a second. Sorry, my mind goes in a lot of directions. But I had just recently heard that there is a church about 15, 20 minutes from me that I think on Tuesday mornings has a women's Bible study. And you don't have to go to that church to join the study, but there's a woman that leads it, and they meet and they have tea and coffee, whatever. And then they're going through the Bible together. And so that's on my list. Like I need to do that because I need to start putting myself out there, and I need to put myself in environments where I have the opportunity to meet good, kind, loving women. And so that's one of the things that I'm thinking through. I'm hoping, I guess that's the biggest one right now for me. That's, aside from that, I guess there could be other action steps we could take. I'm just thinking off the top of my head because the biggest one really was that, getting plugged in with church and getting plugged into women's Bible study. But There's also book clubs that you could join. Maybe there's old friends that you need to reconnect with. That's another avenue. Getting plugged in and getting closer with your family. I've been really leaning into that too. Just, building better relationships with my brothers and my sister-in-laws, getting more connected with my husband. That's a great relationship too. I suppose joining classes, any type of class, there could be cooking classes. Like, this is the thing. If we're doing things that we enjoy doing in a group setting, whether that be yoga or, I don't know, like a weightlifting class or a crocheting class or a book club or a cooking class or art, whatever it is, we have the opportunity to meet like-minded people because they're there doing the same thing. But we're not going to find, I don't think we'll find our friends at home. The Mom in Prayers. Let me Moms in Prayer. If you haven't heard of that organization, a friend of mine told me about it when I was telling her that I was feeling disconnected. This was a couple months ago. And she mentioned that her church, she lives in Michigan, so I don't get to see her often, but she mentioned that her church has a Moms in Prayer group that I should look into. And I was really hoping to do that in person, but it turns out the one in my area was virtual. So I started that on Friday morning. And that's been great. It's been great to pray over my kids. I would encourage you to look into it. I can put the link in the show notes, but I would encourage you to look into it because it's just an hour. And for me, when I first started, I was like, oh, I don't know how this is going to go, an hour. How are we going to fill our time with praying? And also I was a little nervous because frankly, I don't make a regular practice of praying out loud with other women, especially women I don't know. But I will tell you, it's been like such a blessing. It was great to be able to put myself in an uncomfortable situation and grow and pray with other women and have them pray for my kids and then have them pray over my kids for the same needs and then do the same for them. And just to get online, even in a virtual setting with women that you've never met that look totally different than you, that are walking a different life than you, but you feel connected to them and like they're a sister because they love Jesus is a really remarkable thing. So I would encourage you there too. That could be very, very helpful to you. And they have chapters, all like local chapters, I think in every state, and I think all over the world, because one of the women I prayed with is from Korea and she splits time between Massachusetts and Korea. So she has groups, I think, in both areas. But that would be a place to make connections too. And then one other thing that's on my mind for connections, and I just did this yesterday and I want to do a full podcast on it, but my son and I, my youngest son, who is going to be a junior in high school, he and I served at a soup kitchen with a local church, not a church. We're in New Hampshire right now, so not a church that we attend regularly, but it was a church that I found online on Wednesday nights. They cook a whole meal and anybody that can afford to eat, whether they're homeless or whatever the case, can come and they are served a delicious meal and they're talked to just dignity, love, respect, warm, good food, straight from bread, salad, main course to dessert. But the reason I'm telling you this is because I met two awesome women there, like that I would have never expected. But it's just funny to think about you're praying for these things and then you might meet people in places you don't even expect to meet them. So that was really cool. And who knows where those connections will lead. So I think the more that we put ourselves out into the community, the more that we lean into service and to draw close to God, the more we'll find connection and relationship. And that's what I'm hopeful for my life. I mean, TBD, we'll see. But I feel really hopeful about it, because I do, again, I have the tendency to go into like poor me mode. I'm all by myself. I'm so lonely. What if something happens to my husband and my kids are older and what's my life going to look like 20 years from now? If I don't have friends, I'll be all alone. Like these are the silly things that go through my mind. Did they go through yours too? I don't know. But anyway, it just, and then you can lead to being somebody you're not just to try to fit in like you did in, junior high, which is just, we're too old for that. So it's tricky. And who would ever guess that you'd hit 50 and beyond or 40 and beyond, whatever that looks like for you, 60 and beyond, midlife, and still be struggling with friendship? I really hope I didn't just do this whole podcast and I'm the only one. But anyway, yeah, that's a lot. It's a lot, ladies. I look forward to building this community, to having more listeners, to you hopefully sharing with your friends. We need connection. And this is a great place to connect as well. And maybe we start a group online where we get together regularly and we can meet virtually. I don't know what this is going to look like. I just know God's placed it on my heart. And in a weird way, as I'm talking to this camera, I feel like I'm connecting with you, and I hope you feel the same to me. And I would love it if we can continue to connect. And I would also love it, as I've said at the end of other podcasts, if you would just reach out and get in touch. After that first podcast, I was so nervous about it dropping. I didn't know how it'd go. And you go through that, oh, it was terrible. I said silly things, like nobody's going to relate to this. And I had two women I'd never even met. I hope I get to meet them someday in person that reached out to me via email. The one is I was doubting myself and I just had finished with sitting with the Lord and praying. And I just popped on my phone and her message popped up and it was like a word from God. Like I emailed her back and said, God spoke through you to just lift me up and like reassure me. It was so lovely to have her connect with me in the podcast and then her connect to me and just fill my cup. So I pray that there will be more of those interactions. And I really do want to hear from you. I'm not just saying that as fluff. If something resonated with you, if there's something that you want me to talk about or that you're struggling with, because we're all in this season together. If you're struggling with it, I probably have or somebody else has. If you don't like what I said or you want me, if you have feedback, anything, like I'm here for it. I want to grow. And sometimes we don't grow unless we hear, I hope it'll be kind, but you know, constructive criticism, I guess is the word. So anything, don't hesitate to reach out. I really do want to build relationships with you. The best way to do that is, well, if you're following me on Instagram or Facebook at the Stillwell Mom, you could DM me, but you could also, and probably the quickest way for me to get it would be by emailing me at Brooke with an E on the end at the Stillwell Mom. And then again, ladies, check out the website, www.thestillwellmom.com, for everything that I've got going on there. And there's resources there. And if you are enjoying the podcast so far, I know we're only 3 in, but I would just ask, if you feel so led, if you would take a moment to give a 5-star and a little 1-sentence something to review, maybe where you're from and something that you picked up or liked about it, it would be such a blessing and a huge help for the podcast to get more visibility. And certainly if something resonated with you here today or past episodes, it will likely resonate with your friends or family members too. So please share with them. Again, I'm looking forward to building this with you and seeing where God takes it. And remember that, again, you are not alone in midlife. You always have the choice to choose stewardship over striving. And you can be strong in body, steady in mind, and rooted in faith.